Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. Andre, thanks for all the questions. I really appreciate these good questions. We got a bunch of questions that I'd love to answer, so we're gonna get to that. This month I've got a huge promo going on for Oud lessons, like Zoom lessons that I do online, and the deal is that if you commit to 4 months of lessons, no matter how many lessons you do in that month, I'm doing a deal of 20% off my regular price. So that would work out to $40 per lesson. If you commit to 4 months of one lesson per month, it's $40. Usually it would be $50. If you do 2 lessons, it'll be $40 each lesson. So that's my promo this month. You got to email me so that I can schedule those in advance for you and get you the details for that. Here's my email address: support@OudforGuitarists.com. And so yeah, email me if you're interested in committing to 4 months of lessons, and we can hook you up with some good discounts. And I've got a bunch of questions that I'm going to answer today and go through some basics of playing oud. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put that in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. So a couple of questions that I want to discuss are: what oud tuning do you recommend? Where should I buy an oud? How do I hold the oud if I have a big belly or large chest? What's the difference between Turkish ouds and Arabic ouds? Okay, these are all really good questions that people have sent me. And Andre has put a whole bunch of good questions here in the chat, so I'm definitely going to answer all of these. They're really good. All right, so let's first talk about the oud tuning that I recommend. So there are several oud tunings for the oud, and some of these oud tunings depend on the makom you're playing and the style. But the general oud tuning that I start people off on is either C, G, D, A, F, C, or C, G, D, A, G, C. So these two are the variable ones. These ones are always the same: C, G, D, A. Those ones always stay the same. The 2 bass ones are variable, and sometimes we tune this one to F. This is in F right now. This one is C. Sometimes it's G, C. Sometimes it's G, D. And it just depends on the makom that you're playing, or what the tonic is that you're playing. So if you're playing something in the key of D, the starting note is D, let's say Hijaz on D, then you might want to tune that low bass string to a D, so that you have that to make a drone sound with. That's an option. You may also want to tune that second bass string to a G, so that you have the fourth, so that you have that available. Right now it's tuned to F, so I have to use my finger to get that G. So there's some differences here, but I usually start people off for Arabic lessons. For Arabic oud lessons, I start off with the second last string tuned to F, because it's easier to play most of the makoms. For Persian style playing, I start people off with the G, because we need that G for Persian style oud playing. We always like to make reference to that G, and we don't use the F so much in the way that the style that we play. For Turkish, it's a little bit different. I'll show you Turkish tuned oud right now. So Turkish ouds are tuned one step up. So we've got D, A, E, B, and then these 2 strings again are variable. Right now this is tuned to F sharp, and this is tuned to D. So sometimes people start off in Turkish tuning, they start off tuning all fourths. So this is right now tuned all fourths. and then the last string. What this does, it enables you to learn the proper fingerings off the bat. So it's the same pattern for the fingerings all the way down, because the strings have the same relationship 4 notes apart from each other all the way to the bass. So it's easy to kind of work out. But as you get more advanced, you need to adjust these 2 bass strings to match the makom you're playing and what you want to do. So usually for Turkish tuning, I just use the same Arabic tuning or Persian tuning that I mentioned before, but 1 step higher. So I might tune this low bass string to an A. And I might keep this one just as a D. So that's something to consider. Those are the different tunings. Now, Turkish ouds can be tuned variably as well. There's another tuning that other oud players like to use, like Necati Celik. They like to play everything some of the makoms in a different place, in a different key. So what they do is they tune this low bass string to a B, because they like to do and then they tune this one to F sharp. So what you get is this beautiful growl, this beautiful harmony here, and you can play, the range of the oud is extended, and you get a nice beautiful range. All the way up here, all in the key of B. So it's really nice for playing makoms, ushak, for example, in the key of B. So you got this low string here. Also Hijaz on B. So that's a really beautiful tuning. You can also tune an Arabic oud to this tuning, but 1 step lower if you like. So these are the oud tunings that I recommend. I'm not a big fan, if you've watched my other videos, I'm not a big fan of the high F tuning. This is because the range of the oud becomes kind of like a different instrument. And I don't really like the overall resonance of the instrument when it's in this tuning. No matter what oud I've tuned, high quality oud, low quality oud, whatever oud I've tuned to high F, I don't really like the overall resonance of the oud, so I like the old school style with the low string, the low tuning. But for the most part, most of the strings are tuned the same, so you can play 90%, 95% of the Arabic music repertoire on both tunings. It's just that you have a different range. So you have the same core 4 strings, C, G, D, A, and then can be tuned to F or G. And then you've got this high F range here. So you can do most of the repertoire. But everyone's got a different taste and style. So yeah. So now I want to answer the question about where should I buy an oud. So this is going to tie into the questions that Andre has here. there's a lot of different places where you should buy an oud, and that's a complicated question. So it's not an easy answer, but there are a lot of websites that are good for beginners. So I recommend places like ethnicmusical.com for beginner ouds. Now I'm talking beginner ouds here. For someone who just wants to get an oud out of the box and for it to last them for at least 2 to 4 years before they need to upgrade to something that will get them better sounding oud. So Zeryab ouds are great. This oud is a Zeryab oud. You can buy them at ethnicmusical.com. You can buy them at morrisoudshop.com. They're great instruments, really great all around. I've done some recording with this instrument and I really like the sound. It's got a classic Arabic sound. You can't really go wrong with these instruments. The only problem with these instruments is sometimes the details, the finesse around the details are not really there. Like the nut sometimes need to be adjusted, repaired. The overall craftsmanship of these ouds are good. They're decent, but again, you get some varnish problems, on the back. Not a lot of attention to detail. You can see like once you get it up close, it's not the most finesse. For the same price that you'd pay buying this oud, if you go into a music store and buy a guitar, you'll get a better finesse around the details on a guitar at the same price. But nevertheless, you do get nice quality sound of an oud, a classic Syrian sound, classic Arabic sounding oud that you can play for any genre of Arabic music, really. And you can tune these to the high F tuning, you can tune it to the old school C to C tuning, whatever you like. As you can see here, I've messed around with it. I've put some guitar gear pegs on this. I don't recommend doing this, by the way. There's another video coming out about that. So these ouds are great. I really like these ouds. They're all around great for beginners. You can buy them at morrisoudshop.com, ethnicmusical.com, and those are places where you can get them. Also at Morris Oud Shop, they've got great apprentice ouds, which are made by Morris Shahata's apprentices in the factory. In Egypt, those are Egyptian ouds. I've heard good things about those ouds as well. I've never played one myself, but those are good places for beginners to go. Now, if you want to buy something more high-end, like let's say over $1,000, then you have a lot more options available to you. Now you really have to decide whether you want to buy an Arabic oud or a Turkish oud. Arabic ouds and Turkish ouds do sound different. They have different sounds. It's up to personal taste and preference. So for example, if I want to give a general what the difference of the ouds are, there's construction differences which have a little bit affected a little bit. There's also the sound. That's the biggest thing that a musician is going to notice is the sound. Arabic ouds are a little bit more rustic, punchy, a little bit more percussive in their sound. Turkish ouds are a little bit more melodic, a little bit more reverb, a little bit more resonant, perhaps a touch louder. Now we're talking ouds above $1,000, not ouds that are lower than that. Turkish ouds can be a little bit more buzzy, but that depends on the strings and the setup too. Not all ouds Turkish ouds have to sound buzzy. It really depends on the setup and the strings that are used. You can get a warmer tone out of Turkish ouds for sure. When I tune my this Yildirim Palabiyak oud up Arabic tuning, I get a pretty warm sound depending on the strings I use. And I really like the sound. It's really melodic. You really get nice overtones and harmonies with the sound. Again, with Arabic ouds, they're a bit more soulful, let's say. They've got this percussiveness. They've got this little deep growl to them. So that's kind of the differences between Turkish ouds and Arabic ouds. Construction-wise, Turkish ouds are a little bit thin on the top. The soundboard are a little bit thinner. The string scale length is shorter. And Andre, good question about scale length. I prefer larger ouds. These ouds that I have actually, they're all 58.5 centimeters from bridge to nut. And that's not my preference, actually. I prefer longer ouds, like 61.5 centimeter, at least 60 centimeters. Those are my preference. Larger oud, the more authentic the Arabic sound I think you're going to get. That's just my opinion. Oud makers these days are trying to get that old school oud sound out of smaller instruments, so that for the playability. And people are getting used to the smaller, the more comfort level that shorter scale ouds have. Me, I don't pay attention to that. I play whatever you put in front of me as best as I can. So I prefer that low bass growl that you can get out of instruments that are 60 centimeters and longer, from nut to the bridge. So that's what I prefer. Now let's see here. I want to talk a little bit more, get into details about Sam Ouds, Zeryab, Dimitri Rapakusius, Sala Music, Farouk Turuns, John Vergara, Yildirim Palabiek. All these names are pretty good. You can't go particularly wrong when you go with Dimitri Rapakusios, when you go with Farouk Turuns, John Vergara, Yildirim Palabiek. You can't really go wrong. You're going to be paying pretty good prices for their instruments. It really just comes down to what style of oud you want, what music you want to play on this instrument, and get an oud that's suitable for that. So if you want to get an Arabic oud with a genuine Arabic oud sound, then you want to go for, let's say, Sam Ouds, Zeryab, John Vergara, any other Egyptian maker. There's a lot of good Egyptian makers these days, young Egyptian makers. So if you want that Arabic sound, you want to go for those makers. Dimitri's ouds have a nice authentic Arabic sound too. They sound great. Little bit different than the typical Arabic sound. There's just such a range of sound when it comes to Arabic ouds, so it's hard to really place them. But I love my oud that I got made by Dimitri. It's fantastic. It's built like a tank, and it's survived a lot of hits and cracks without the action changing. I really love that oud. Right now it's stuck in Canada. I haven't been able to go back and get it and bring it here, but I love that instrument. Can't wait to get my hands back on it and play it. The instruments from Sala Music, for example, this is their high-end model, their Miras Oud. This is a unique instrument, very different from typical Arabic ouds, very different than Turkish sounding ouds. This is something else, and more. I think that comes from the bridge design. This bridge design is, you'll see, it's like a saddle pickup, not a saddle pickup, a guitar saddle. The strings go over this saddle here, and that produces a different tone, completely different tone. Very strong. I've been playing this oud consistently for the last few months, like every day, and I really like the sound of it. It's a very clear, crisp sound, very different from Turkish ouds and Arabic ouds. It's kind of a modern sound for an oud. I really like it for Persian music. the sound that Persian ouds have. A lot of Persian ouds, modern Persian ouds these days, are using the saddle bridge, and I think it sounds great for Persian music. Sounds great. I really like it. It's just different than your typical traditional sound of oud, but beautiful nonetheless. Yeah, so that's it. Really depends what style of oud you want. It's a complicated question, so I probably didn't do justice to that question here, but it also depends on the price that you're willing to pay too, because the sky's the limit, especially when you're talking about ouds from Farrokh Tarun's, John Vergara. These are prime prices. Really, you have to keep that in mind too. Yeah. I like I said, I like the workmanship of these guys like Dimitri Rapakousios, Farrokh Tarun's, John Vergara, Yildirim Palabiak are excellent, like really excellent. These fine along the details, like no problems with them. Fantastic quality. Now, in terms of, let's see here, I talked about the scale length. I like larger ouds. Yeah. So I hope that answers those questions. I'll get to the rest of the questions in a bit. So this is a really important question. One of my pet peeves about people who come to me for oud lessons is complaining about holding the oud. Holding the oud is going to take some time to get used to. But it doesn't really matter what size of body you have. You can adjust. You'll figure it out. You have to take the time to figure it out, adapt to the oud. Buying a half-cut oud or a flat back oud isn't going to solve your problem. It's not. You just have to adapt to the instrument. It's not like a guitar that has been, has cutouts, and they have different sizes of ouds for different people. You have to adapt to the oud. I've seen small women play large ouds perfectly, no problem. They adapt. They hold it their way of holding it. If you have a huge belly, for example, you gotta hold the oud on an angle. There's guys like John Bilizik Jan, who's passed away now. But he had a huge belly. He was a huge guy, but he played oud fine. He played a smaller Turkish oud, but some people like me who are average size, I'm only 5'5", 5'6" height. I don't have particularly large hands. I prefer larger ouds. They're more comfortable for me. They fit in my body better than smaller ouds like this. The reason is that you have to get your leg higher, your right leg higher for a smaller oud. For a larger oud, you don't have to. You can be more comfortable, and your arm doesn't have to reach so far to get to the strings. So there's different things there, but I just play whatever is in front of me, and I adapt to that. I don't really pay attention so much to the comfort of the instrument. I just kind of go with it. So it takes about maybe up to 2 years to really get comfortable holding the oud. So if you have a large belly, what you have to do, or if you have a large breast, if you're a woman, you have large breasts, you have to angle the oud to the side. Let's see, make sure you can see this. Okay, so you don't hold the oud like this if you have a large belly or a large chest. You hold the oud like this to the side. And that'll help you find space around here where the oud is smaller, and it'll allow your belly to protrude out here. You got to hold it on the side. So that means you push your arm forward like this. This arm gets a lot of room to come around the strings, around the back, and that solves some of your problems. Of course, it's not going to be the end of, you still have to adapt to the instrument, and, it doesn't matter what size you are. There's all shapes and sizes of oud players out there. As long as you're holding the oud right, you got your leg up, you got your arm around the back of the oud like this, you're going to be fine. So that's my question about that. A lot of people have problems with that and make excuses. You know, they buy a flat back oud. I'm not all. There's no excuse. You just have to adapt and rest. Don't get your body all twisted, and make sure you stretch. Make sure you compensate for the shape that the oud is making you get into. So yeah, I've answered all these questions. What oud tuning do I recommend? Where should I buy an oud? How do I hold an oud if I have a big belly or large breasts? What's the difference between Turkish ouds and Arabic ouds? So I've touched on some of those questions. So thanks so much for asking them. Want to answer some of your questions here. You got, can a Turkish oud be tuned into Arabic tuning? Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking that question. For example, these are Turkish made, they're Turkish scale, so 58.5 centimeter from bridge to nut, and you put thicker strings on them for Arabic tuning, and voila, you have Arabic tuning. You just have to find the right strings. Let's see. You can also use a Turkish oud string set and tune down. That is fine. You can totally do that. The problem is that the Turkish strings are going to be a little bit flimsy when they're tuned down, but however, people do that, especially when they need to play with a singer who's got a lower key of voice. All right, so Amar here, very basic question. What does it mean song is playing on X makom? Okay, so for example, let's say you have the song Saluni and Nas is in makom bayati. Right? So is it true that the entire song can be played in just a few notes on that whatever scale? More or less, yeah. But most Arabic music, Turkish music have modulations, have deviations from the makom, from the basic scale of the makom. So, for example, bayati, these are the basic notes that you're going to hear. Let's say the chorus of the song is using these 4 or 5 notes. You know, you can play the whole introduction with 5 notes, okay? 5 or 6 notes. But at some point there's going to be a modulation in most of this music. And so it will deviate from the basic notes that you have in whatever makom. So for example, in bayati, sometimes it goes to bayati shuri. So you have this A flat, B natural, and before it goes back into bayati. So that's what it means. It means the main song, maybe the beginning of the song or the refrain of the song is in that makom. Or it could mean that, let's say, if you want to go in the extended idea of what a makom is, maybe a makom includes certain modulations, certain going here you go into nahawan, going here you go into saba. You can think of this as a large, concept of one makom typically goes into certain makoms. You can then think of that, okay, this way of going from makom bayati, and then okay, we do a modulation into makom saba here. Okay, you could think of that as an extended version of makom bayati, but there's a debate about that, what is what, but for the most part, when you hear a song being in that particular makom, most of the song is in that basic scale, that basic notes that you have in that makom. Or maybe the main part of the song is in that, but you have different branches here and there which are using different notes that are not in the basic makom. Another question here about Viken Najarian. Yeah, his ouds are excellent. I am familiar with his work. I would highly recommend his work if you want highly detailed work and you want to pay for a quality instrument. He's on par with guys like John Vergara, Farouk Tarun's. Definitely. I would highly recommend his work for detailed work. His ouds, as far as I know, they sound more on the Turkish side. I have heard some of his Arabic ouds. They sound beautiful, but they may not be what somebody, let's say, who has been used to playing Egyptian ouds all their life, they wouldn't recognize that as being a Egyptian oud sounding instrument or an Arabic oud sounding instrument. Maybe more on the Turkish side, but nonetheless beautiful ouds, and you would be able to tune them. He would be able to make an Arabic oud for you versus a Turkish oud, depending on your tuning that you want to use and the scale length that you want. You can tweak those things. You can get lower frequencies, mid frequencies by the magic of the woodwork underneath the soundboard. So these things can be customizable to some degree depending on the maker. All right, so that's all I wanted to do today. A little beginner oud kind of lesson. Answering all these questions about the oud. It's very important to answer these questions for you. A lot of times I get another question that I get all the time is, what strings do you recommend? For beginners, I recommend the Dario EJ95A. That string set is very good for beginners. It settles on the instrument quite quickly. The quality is pretty good for the price. The price is quite inexpensive. So I highly recommend that for beginners. If you want to experiment a little bit, then there are other brands that you can, if you want to do something custom or experiment with different sounds, then there are other oud brands that you could go, you can go on forever about oud strings. But usually I recommend the Dario EJ95A. That's for Arabic tuning. Yeah, so that's my beginner oud lesson, a little introduction to the oud. I'll give you another few minutes right now if you have any other specific questions you want to ask about oud playing in general or getting into the oud. And I also want to remind you that if you want to get oud lessons this month, if you want to commit to 4 months or longer, you can get a discount on the oud lessons, 20% off my regular price. So you can email me at support@OudforGuitarists.com if you're serious about that. And recently I also wrote a blog about what I actually teach in my oud lessons. So I'm going to put that link in the description and in the chat so that you can read about that and get a bit more information about what I actually teach and what you can actually learn. I also have some packages. I also have packages if you really just want to try out oud, you have an oud and you want to take like 4 lessons. You can learn the very basics of all the notes, the basic notes on the oud, and you can learn your first song in 4 lessons. A very simple song on the oud in Arabic tuning. I can also do a package of 4 lessons dealing specifically with oud ornamentation. And we highly focus on all these typical ornaments that are make the magic come out in your oud playing and make your audience want to really feel it and really enjoy your playing and get up and dance. This is these ornaments that the oud players are known for. We can do 4 lessons focusing, going deep into these ornaments, exercises on how to play these ornaments and bring them out in your playing. This is a bit more advanced, so you need to have some facility on the instrument already, or you need to have a good strong guitar background or string instrument background. All right, so here's the blog here about my oud lessons. Check that out. I'll put that in the description too. All right, that's in the description. Okay, there's one more question here from Martin. Thanks for asking this. For someone with a Turkish oud, what's the preferred tuning for a beginner? I currently have C sharp, F sharp, B, E, A, D. Earlier you mentioned that. Yeah, so for beginners, that's what people tend to use. And it depends really on your teacher, probably, or the oud method that you're using. But what's nice about that tuning that I hear that people start on that is for the fingerings. The fingerings are uniform all the way down. You don't have any of these different strings in the bass that change the way the fingerings are. It's just the same way all the way down. So that's helpful for beginners to just learn the basics. And Turkish style oud playing focuses on exercising and learning technique first before actually playing real music, at least the methods that I've heard of. So you don't really need to have certain bass strings tuned to a makom, because you're going to be playing exercises which are not really musical in that sense. So you don't need the instrument to resonate at a certain tonality. So that's why the C sharp, F sharp work well for the basics, learning the basic technique. But if you actually want to play music and you want to find a tune that you find a tune that you really like, you want to learn how to play it by ear, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to tweak those bottom bass strings to figure out what's the ideal tuning that makes that song sound the best on that instrument. So earlier I mentioned that the bass is at D. It depends on the makom you're playing. So I'll give you an example. So right now I've got the low bass tuned to D. This is great for when I'm playing a song that's in makom that this is the tonic, or the fifth, the dominant, or the fourth. It helps. So I'll show you an example where this is useful. The overall resonance of the instrument will be more beautiful when you do this. So there's this longa in Nahawand, or let's just. So if I play a tune that's in Nahawand on D, you have that bass to support, to create an overall resonance that's pleasing to your ear. You're going to get sympathetic resonance as well, which is really important to make the oud sound good, especially when you're playing solo. You can also use that open string as a drone. See that just makes it so magical when you have that open string there. Now what happens if you tune that to C sharp? Okay, so C sharp. Now if I want to play the same makom, oh sorry, I tuned it wrong. So now what you have that tonic in a really awkward place with the first finger. So if you want to use that as a supporting drone sound in the back, then you have to use your finger, and that's not always convenient, doesn't always sound good, and you have this tone that doesn't work with the makom you're playing on the open string, so the resonance of the instrument is not going to sound great for what you're playing. You won't be able to hear it from the microphone, but I can hear it in person. I can hear this weird overtone stuff happening that just doesn't make sense. But if you're playing and learning the basics, it's not really relevant. So I hear this weird overtone stuff happening that I don't really like. It just doesn't sound right. So that's what you have to consider. So yeah, thanks for these questions. Really appreciate it. If you're interested in private lessons, make sure you email me and check out that blog post so you can learn more. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. If you have other questions, always free to email me and say hello. Yeah, so thanks for your time. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed, and have a great rest of your evening or your day. Thanks. Bye.